Arthur walked slowly through the house, his mind heavy with the weight of the secrets he carried. My wife had trouble getting pregnant, so we decided to try IVF. To my surprise, before the embryo synthesis, I caught my wife swapping my sperm with that of her first love. Later, when she thought she was giving birth to her and her old flame's child, ready to have him recognized as family, I laughed because I had already swapped the sperm back. I even replaced her egg with that of my ex-girlfriend's. After an overseas inspection of a medical cooperation project, my son Julian and I returned home to find a crowd of rarely seen distant relatives gathered at our house. It was such a scene that one might think we were having a family tree assembly. The most eye-catching among them was Silas, sitting in the center of the sofa with red-rimmed eyes, while Elena, my fun-loving wife who frequents bars and clubs, nestled against him, comforting him softly. I raised an eyebrow, placed my suitcase aside, and asked Elena, "What special occasion is today that brings such a lively crowd?" Julian, following behind me, crossed his arms coldly and stared at Silas with disdain, already sensing this man's identity. My mother-in-law sat in the main seat looking displeased and hesitant to speak. Before Elena could respond, Silas walked towards Julian with tears in his eyes, exclaiming, "My dear son, I am your real father." Julian deftly stepped aside, his face filled with disgust, as if Silas were some filthy thing. He stepped back and said coldly, "My father's name is Arthur." I held Julian's hand and gave him a reassuring look, then raised my fist and punched Silas in the face. The dull thud of my fist echoed in the living room as I said coldly, "Don't claim kinship falsely." Elena immediately stood up, tenderly helping Silas up while shouting at me, "Arthur, have you gone mad? How dare you hit Silas?" She raised her hand to slap me, but Julian quickly stepped forward and slapped her instead, saying through gritted teeth, "How dare you hit my dad?" Julian's voice was low but carried undeniable authority. Elena stood in shock, both angry and upset, raising her hand again to hit Julian. Silas, however, pulled her back, pretending to dissuade her. "Elena, don't hit him. He's our son." His fake fatherly demeanor made me want to vomit. Elena lowered her hand, glaring at Julian. "If not for your biological father's sake, I would have taught you a lesson today." Julian sneered. "Oh, I'd love to see what you can do." His sharp gaze was exactly like mine in my youth, and I felt a surge of pride. My boy, raised well by me. An elder cleared his throat, trying to calm the chaotic scene. Everyone quiet down. His authoritative voice gradually restored order, and all eyes turned to him. He looked at Elena and asked, "Elena, why have you called everyone here today?" Elena took a deep breath as if summoning courage. She reached out to hold Silas's arm affectionately and said, "Actually, today I have an important announcement." She paused, looking around at everyone before finally fixing her gaze on me and Julian. I watched her calmly, curious to see what tricks she would pull. She said, "Julian is not Arthur's biological son." Elena's voice was low but like a bomb exploding in the living room. Julian turned to me in shock, and I signaled him to stay calm. The relatives around us whispered excitedly, like sharks smelling blood. She continued, "Years ago when we did IVF, the doctor said Arthur's sperm was of poor quality. To spare his feelings, I swapped it with Silas's." She cast a malicious glance at me, hoping to see me lose control, but I remained composed. Forced to continue her act, she said, "Today I've gathered everyone to witness Julian acknowledging his biological father." The room erupted with chatter, some saying, "If Julian isn't Arthur's son, he must acknowledge his real father. It's time for Arthur to step down from the Miller family's businesses." I inwardly sneered at these relatives who had been marginalized from the company's management and were eager to see me ousted. Julian tightened his grip on my hand. I said firmly, "Julian will always be my son." Silas, looking helpless, sighed. "Arthur, how long will you deceive yourself? Julian is indeed my son." Over the years, watching Elena treat Julian like a puppet, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She thought she was tricking me, but little did she know she had been raising someone else's child for over 20 years. Elena interrupted my thoughts with a sneer. "You're just being stubborn. Julian may have been with you all these years, but his biological father is Silas." I replied calmly, with a hint of provocation, "You're dreaming." Elena snorted, "If you don't believe me, Let's do a paternity test. I also want a divorce. I've had enough of being your lapdog for 25 years. I've been more than kind to you." When she mentioned divorce, a hint of joy flashed across her face. It seemed she had been thinking about it for a long time. She dared to say she had been kind to me for 25 years. She and I had lived in separate rooms while I raised our child alone. She was off gallivanting with Silas while I fought in the business world to uphold the Miller family's name. She was partying with a bunch of rich kids, but she was wrong about one thing. I didn't marry her out of love. I married her to gain the status of the Miller family's son-in-law and control over the Miller Group. Now that the Miller Group was firmly under my control, Elena had no more use to me. I said, "Divorce is fine with me." I shrugged indifferently. "But there's no need for a paternity test. I'm certain Julian is my son." Julian looked at me with determination. "Dad, I believe you." Elena and Silas panicked. She said, "Julian, don't you believe your mother?" Julian ignored her and stayed close to me. At that moment, a boy who looked like a college student burst in. He walked straight to Julian, excitedly calling out, "Brother!" Everyone was stunned. It was one thing to have another father pop up, but now there was another brother. Looking at the boy who resembled Silas, I had a hunch this must be Elena and Silas's illegitimate child. They had hidden it well. No wonder Elena's frequent absences and her pregnancy had gone unnoticed. My mother-in-law, sitting at the head of the table, asked Elena, "What's going on?" The atmosphere in the living room froze again. The boy with red-rimmed eyes looked like he was about to cry. "Brother, my name is Caleb. I've always known about you," he stammered, his voice trembling. He glanced at me fearfully, then quickly lowered his head as if afraid I would scold him. "My dad often talks about you, saying how excellent and handsome you are." Silas put on a pained expression. "Julian, my dear son, I've missed you so much all these years." He looked up, his face full of sorrow as if he had suffered a great injustice. "Caleb has always wanted to meet you. We've often secretly watched you." Caleb nodded eagerly, adding, "Really, brother, I even went to your school just to be closer to you." He took out a stack of photos from his pocket and handed them to Julian, saying, "These are your photos." I took them secretly. Julian flipped through the photos, seeing himself in various moments wearing a graduation gown, looking tired after basketball practice, and passionately debating with classmates. He felt a chill run down his spine, realizing there had been a creepy guy stalking and photographing him all these years. Elena wasn't idle either. She walked over to my mother-in-law, pointing at Caleb, and said solemnly, "Mom, this is your grandson. Everyone is here to witness this. Please acknowledge him." Elena was clever. She knew that after my father-in-law's death, my mother-in-law held the real power in the Miller family. By inviting all the relatives, she hoped to pressure my mother-in-law into accepting Caleb. She was certain that if my mother-in-law agreed, I would have no choice but to comply. After all, she had observed my filial piety towards my mother-in-law over the past 25 years. Caleb, quick-witted, immediately turned to my mother-in-law and respectfully called out, "Grandma." My mother-in-law looked at Caleb, then at me, her eyes filled with complex emotions. She didn't immediately respond to Caleb's greeting. I knew she felt sorry for me. Not wanting to make things difficult for her, I broke the silence. "Elena, your real intention is to have this illegitimate child recognized as a Miller family member and inherit the Miller family's assets, right? Why involve Julian?" I turned to Julian, exchanging a glance. Even if Julian isn't my biological son, he is still my only child. All my assets, properties, stocks, funds, including 20% of the Miller Group shares, will be left to him. Julian, would you rather stay with me or go with your mom and this so-called father? My son's quick mind grasped my meaning instantly. He declared, "Mom has a new son now, and the assets won't be left to me. Of course, I'll stay with Dad. Good boy, well taught by me." Stating his purpose in reverse, Silas's eyes lit up at the mention of all my assets going to Julian, shining brighter than a 1,000-watt bulb. He knew my assets were substantial, including a significant amount of gold, silver, and real estate, not to mention the 20% Miller Group shares, a veritable gold mine. Greed, naked greed, was written all over his face. He whispered to Elena, "When the old man passed away, he divided his 60% of the group's shares into 4 parts. 20% to Arthur, 20% to the old lady, 10% to Julian, and you only got 10%. If Arthur transfers his shares to Julian and we later coax Julian into giving us his shares, you'll have 40%. Right now, we need to make Arthur give up his shares and assets, leaving him with nothing, and bring Julian to our side. Elena, after some thought, agreed with Silas and presented herself as a loving mother to Julian. She said, "Julian, your brother can fend for himself and won't fight you for the assets. I'm willing to give you everything." She paused, adding a condition. "You must go with Silas for a paternity test. If it shows that you two are father and son, you have to acknowledge Silas as your dad and treat him well." Julian glanced at me, and I gave a barely noticeable nod. "Okay." Julian agreed readily, but cleverly added a condition. "Before we do the paternity test, both of you need to come with me to the notary office and transfer all assets to my name unconditionally." I silently applauded my son's shrewdness. He understood that only assets in hand were real, not mere verbal promises. This got the greedy relatives excited. If Silas could think of it, so could they. They rubbed their hands as if they saw countless treasures beckoning to them. Elena didn't understand business. If the Miller Group were under her name, it would be easy for them to manipulate her. One of the relatives led the cheers. "Good, good, good. That's the way to do it." Another relative took out his phone, dialing as he said, "I'll contact the notary office right away." A group of people busied themselves as if preparing for a celebration. My mother-in-law, concerned, tried to stop me. "Good child, reconsider the asset transfer." I smiled and shook my head, reassuring her. "Mom, don't worry, I have my reasons." Knowing my capabilities, she didn't try to persuade me further. With their help, all assets under Elena's and my name were transferred to Julian, except for a living allowance of $50,000 each. In the notary office, Elena and Silas looked lovingly at Julian, envisioning a future where he led the Miller Group to greatness, their smiles bright as they dreamed. During the notarization process, I added, "Silas, don't you claim to love Julian? Shouldn't you show it?" I casually suggested, eyeing Silas's hypocritical face. "I've spent millions raising your son these past 20-plus years. I'm not asking for compensation. Just give the money to Julian. After all, I love him the most." Julian seized the opportunity. "Uncle Silas, you've been with my mom for over 20 years. You must have saved millions, right? Since we're at the notary, why not show your sincerity? Otherwise, I'll doubt your love for me and think you just want the Miller family's assets." Silas's face stiffened, caught in a dilemma. He'd feel pain giving up the money, but refusing would cast doubt on his motives. Reluctantly, he pulled out a card and handed it to Julian, saying, "Julian, of course Dad loves you. Here's $5 million I've saved over the years." Julian didn't hesitate to grasp the card and called in the notary personnel for immediate notarization. Silas smiled stiffly like he was being skinned alive. The DNA testing center was Elena's choice. Fearing I'd manipulate the results, she chose the most authoritative National Forensic Center. I smirked at her naivety. After samples were taken from me, Silas, and Julian, I requested a sample from Elena too. Elena looked at me incredulously. "Arthur, are you crazy? Julian is undoubtedly my child." I smirked. "We're already here, might as well do it." Julian didn't understand my motive, but trusted I had a reason. He pouted and demanded Elena do the test too. Now treating Julian like a deity, she complied. As we left the center, Caleb arrived late, carrying flowers. "Brother," he called to Julian, trying to hug him. Julian, disgusted, pushed him away. "Don't touch me, it's gross." Caleb, taller than Julian by half a head, looked decent. Silas tried to smooth things over. "Julian, he's your brother. A family should love each other." Julian rolled his eyes. "Wait for the results before claiming kinship." I added calmly, "I won't interrupt your family bonding. Elena, let's go get the divorce papers." With no assets and no child custody to negotiate, Elena and I didn't even need a divorce agreement. We went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau for the divorce certificates. Silas's eyes widened in joy, shocked by the swift divorce process. He expected me to cling on stubbornly, but seeing Julian firmly by my side made him envious. After Julian went to the parking lot to get the car, Silas finally had a chance to mock. "Arthur, Elena never loved you. Do you know why Julian is named Julian? Because my name has an L in it, symbolizing Silas." Elena, clinging to Silas smugly, said, When the paternity test results come out, Julian will naturally come back to us. Caleb, dropping his innocent act, arrogantly said, all the money is Julian's now. When the results confirm the truth, you'll be left homeless. I didn't bother responding to their foolish provocations. Elena, feeling confident, revealed her true intentions. You've controlled the Miller Group for so long. Now it's time for Silas and me to take charge. I laughed coldly. You were always after the Miller Group's assets using Julian. Elena snorted. So what if I am? Now that the assets are all transferred to Julian, once the paternity test results are out, I'll be the true master of the Miller Group. I replied with a cold gaze. Then let's see if you're really that lucky to take control of the Miller Group. Their schemes were as noisy as firecrackers, thinking they had everything under control, but they didn't realize they had no chance from the start. While I was handing over the company affairs, Caleb showed up, kicked the general manager out, and brazenly sat in the leather chair with his legs crossed, claiming he was the general manager because his brother was the chairman. No one dared to stop him, but I did. I said, throw him out. Security guards immediately stepped forward to lift Caleb. He shouted, how dare you touch me? My brother is the chairman. I'm his biological brother. You dogs, try touching me. He even cursed at me. You bastard, you've been kicked out of the Miller family and have no right to command the Miller Group's employees. He pushed and shoved the security guards, trying to hit me. Outrageous. Just as I was about to teach him a lesson, Julian arrived, asking coldly, what's going on? Caleb immediately put on a pitiful expression. Brother, you're here just in time. This bastard wants the security to kick me out. Julian looked at him coldly. This is a company, not a place for you to cause trouble. And I'm not your brother. A voice chimed in. Julian, how can you speak to your brother like that? Silas arrived too. Your family. You need your brother to help you with company matters. Without family support, you'll be bullied. Julian sneered. Throw them both out. Seeing that the soft approach didn't work, Silas tried to be forceful. I'm Elena's husband, Julian's biological father. This group belongs to me too. I laughed coldly. Throw them out and don't dirty the company. The security guards, finally understanding who was in charge, lifted the clueless pair and dragged them out. Silas still shouting, Arthur, wait for the paternity test results. I'll make you beg me for a meal. I watched his pathetic state and said, don't worry, I'm eagerly waiting for the results. The long-awaited day for Silas finally arrived. I got up early, donned a full suit, ready to watch Silas's downfall from a high place. Except for my mother-in-law, Elena had invited all the relatives to the forensic center to witness the results, probably hoping more people would see me as a joke. Before the results were revealed, I asked Elena with a smirk, this is the forensic center you chose. You won't dispute the results, right? Elena, with her head held high, confidently said, of course not. I always keep my word. I almost laughed out loud. So naive. She wouldn't believe it until she saw it. As the technician arrived with the results, Silas began his performance. He affectionately put his arm around Elena's shoulders, saying solemnly, Elena, once the results are out, our family can finally reunite. He even glanced at me provocatively. I ignored him, turning to Julian, who also looked indifferent. Silas, hitting a wall, adjusted his expression and turned to Julian. From now on, I'm your father. If you need anything, just tell Dad. He took out a small box and handed it to Julian. This is a watch I bought for you, a gift for recognizing me. Do you like it? Julian, without even looking at it, coldly replied, no need. Silas's smile froze, and Elena quickly tried to smooth things over. Julian, your father means well. Julian interrupted, I don't need his goodwill. I only have one father, and that's Arthur. A warm feeling surged in my heart. My son, always on my side. Just then, the technician returned with 3 DNA test results. Silas, Elena, and Caleb immediately perked up, their eyes glued to the documents like hungry wolves. They looked at me triumphantly, as if I would be disgraced the next moment and they would enjoy wealth and honor. I could hardly contain my laughter. The technician opened the envelope and Silas's breath quickened. Elena's hands trembled with excitement. Her face flushed. She muttered, Julian, we can finally be together as a family. She glanced at me with an expression that seemed to say I was already defeated. Silas's body trembled with excitement. Julian, Dad finally proved himself. Foolish. Caleb eagerly approached Julian. Brother, once we get back to the Miller Group, make me the general manager. I'm your real brother. Only I can sincerely help you. He acted as if Julian's help was a given, as if the general manager position was already his. I watched their pathetic performance with a cold sneer. They wouldn't know who the real fool was until the last moment. The technician cleared his throat and began to read the results. According to the DNA comparison, Mr. Silas and Mr. Julian. He deliberately paused, making Silas and Elena even more nervous, stretching their necks as if they could hear better. The surrounding relatives held their breath. Their expressions varied, waiting to see my downfall. The technician are not biologically related. The air seemed to freeze. Elena's eyes widened and she screamed hysterically, "Impossible! There must be a mistake." Silas, equally shocked, asked, "How can this be? How is there no biological relationship?" Silas's face turned pale, and he couldn't hide the terror in his expression. Caleb snatched the report, saying, "You must have misread it. Let me see." After reading it, he collapsed into a chair, muttering, "How can this be?" I asked the technician to read out the paternity test between me and Julian. According to the DNA comparison, Arthur and Julian are biological father and son. The room erupted in disbelief. Elena, struck as if by lightning, muttered, "Impossible." Seeing the confusion on my mother-in-law's face and others, I kindly explained, "When you tried to swap the samples, I saw it. So I swapped my sperm back." Watching her face turn increasingly pale, I continued, "Oh, and I also swapped your egg with that of my ex-girlfriend's." The room fell silent in shock. My mother-in-law looked up, her eyes filled with disbelief. I turned to Elena and said, "Julian is not your child. Congratulations on being a mother to my son for over 20 years. Elena grabbed the paternity report from the technician and, seeing the result, her eyes turned blood red. She lunged at me, shouting, "You scum!" But I caught her and pushed her to the ground, looking down at her coldly. Silas, upon hearing this, clung to Elena, his voice hoarse. "Elena, if Julian isn't yours, then he isn't a Miller. The only heir can be Caleb." His face lit up with hope as he clung to Elena's hand. Realizing what had happened, Elena looked up, a hint of malice in her eyes. She stumbled to her feet, turned to my mother-in-law, and said, "Mom, everyone heard and saw that Julian isn't my child." She pointed at me, spitting angrily. "He's the bastard child of Arthur and his ex-girlfriend. We can't let an outsider inherit the Miller family's assets." Silas and Caleb echoed her. "Yes, throw Julian out. The heir must be Caleb." My mother-in-law, recovering from shock, looked at me with complex emotions. She trembled slightly and asked, "Arthur, is it true?" Seeing her like this, I felt a pang of sadness. "It's true," I confirmed. Elena, dissatisfied with my mother-in-law's reaction, shook her hand. "Mom, you have to announce Caleb as the heir." My mother-in-law, regaining her composure, asked calmly, "Do you know who Arthur's ex-girlfriend is?" Elena, desperate, retorted, "Who cares? Julian isn't our child." My mother-in-law said, "Arthur's ex-girlfriend is your sister Beatrice. She's my biological daughter, so Julian is still a Miller and the rightful heir." Her words exploded like a bomb in the crowd. Our family tradition dictates the legitimate eldest child inherits the business. Nowadays, it's about the legitimate child of the original wife. Only if there are no direct descendants does it pass to others. Remember your place. Elena, stunned by the revelation, turned pale. My father-in-law had brought Elena into the family only after Beatrice had an accident and became comatose. Since then, Elena had tried to usurp power but failed. Elena, still in denial, shouted, "I don't believe Julian is Beatrice's child. Why should we trust Arthur's word?" I ridiculed her and pulled out another paternity test report. "This is Julian's paternity test with Beatrice." I showed the report to everyone. "If you don't believe it, Beatrice is still in the nursing home and Julian is here. We can arrange a state-level DNA test." The crowd murmured in agreement, acknowledging Julian as the rightful heir. Silas and Caleb were dumbfounded, their plans shattered. Understanding the situation, the relatives started to leave one after another. Elena glared at me, contemplating something. Swallowing her pride, she walked up to me, pleading, "Arthur, I know you love me. You just dislike me going out to clubs and bars and being close to other men, right? I promise I won't contact Silas again. Please let me stay in the Miller family. I looked at her with pity and said slowly, Elena, you're wrong. I never loved you. Her face turned ashen. What did you say? She stammered. Then why did you always stare at me and insist on marrying me? I explained coldly. Because you look like Beatrice. I found solace in your resemblance. Marrying you was to protect Beatrice's legacy. You posing as the Miller family's daughter allowed me to enter the Miller group and prevent power grabs from other branches. You must be wondering why Beatrice, my ex-girlfriend, was favored over you who has blood ties to the family. When your sister had her accident, my father-in-law had no choice but to bring you into the family, given you were his illegitimate child. Elena, devastated by the truth, stumbled back. So I was just a substitute all along, she muttered. Everything she had was built on a lie. Now exposed, she had nothing left. We had played this charade for 25 years, and now it was time for the curtain to fall. I had the servants pack her things and threw her out of the villa. Mom, I've been working with a foreign medical institute on a project about stimulating the nerves of coma patients to help them wake up. My mother-in-law's eyes lit up with hope. You mean? I nodded. Beatrice has responded well to the treatment and will wake up soon. My mother-in-law, tears streaming down her face, whispered, My dear Beatrice. Meanwhile, Elena, wandering aimlessly, returned to the apartment she once shared with Silas, only to be met with disdain. Silas mocked. You fool, now we have nothing. Elena retorted. If you hadn't swapped the sperm, we wouldn't be here. Silas, stunned, argued. You agreed to it. Elena, losing her temper, screamed. Shut up. It's pointless now. We have no money. What are we going to do with just 50,000? Silas shrugged. Don't expect me to support you. Desperate, Elena asked. What do we do? Silas, thinking of something, said, The 5 million Julian has, let's get it back. They stumbled to Julian's apartment, ringing the doorbell for ages. Julian finally opened the door, unfazed by their presence. What do you want? Silas, pushing past him, demanded, Give me back my money. Julian sneered. Why should I? Silas, trembling with anger, said, That money is mine. Julian, lounging on the sofa, replied, Uncle Silas, the 5 million was legally gifted to me, so I don't owe you anything. Silas, overwhelmed, collapsed clutching his chest and fell unconscious. Panicked, Elena screamed, Silas. She held him, shouting for help. Julian, still composed, called 120, then as if nothing had happened returned to his book. With their money gone, Elena and Silas blamed each other. After spending the 50,000, Elena found herself penniless. Silas refused to support her unless she got a job. I ever so kind arranged a job for Elena through a headhunter. Sometime later, I invited Julian out to dinner. On the way, I hummed a tune. Julian asked why I was so happy. I replied, Because there's a good show waiting for us. From the second-floor private room of the open kitchen restaurant, Julian watched through the glass as Elena, dressed in a waitress's uniform, served tables downstairs. He raised an eyebrow. Is this it? I smiled. Just wait and see. Moments later, Silas entered the restaurant with a beautiful woman. They laughed and chatted intimately. Elena, seeing them, froze, her expression darkening. Elena demanded, Silas, what are you doing here? Silas ignored her, continuing his flirtatious conversation with the woman. Elena's voice rose. Silas, I'm talking to you. Finally, Silas glanced at her dismissively. What do you think I'm doing? Eating, obviously. Are you blind? Elena pointed at the woman. Who is she? Silas laughed shamelessly. What's it to you? If Chloe and I are here, does it bother you? Elena's face turned red with rage. What is your relationship with her? Silas replied casually. She's my girlfriend. Is that a problem? Elena staggered back. Girlfriend? You, Silas continued. We've been together for over 20 years. All the money I took from you was to support her. He paused and added, Oh, by the way, the baby you lost wasn't the one you gave birth to. I bribed the doctor to swap it for Chloe's son Caleb. Elena's face drained of color as if her soul had been sucked out. She stared at Silas, her eyes filled with disbelief and despair. Beside him, Chloe laughed mockingly. Sister, you've been played for a fool. Elena's world collapsed. The man she loved had betrayed her, and the son she raised wasn't hers. 20 years of devotion were nothing but a cruel joke. In a fit of rage, she ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and lunged at Silas, stabbing him while screaming, "You ruined me. You ruined everything, Silas." Silas screamed as blood soaked his clothes. Julian watched in horror as the scene unfolded while I sipped my tea calmly. The police quickly arrived and took Elena away. Julian, stunned, asked, "Dad, is this the show you wanted me to see?" I put down my tea and said seriously, "Julian, there's a lesson. Never show mercy to your enemies." Julian, confused, asked, "Isn't it enough to just kick her out? Why go to such lengths?" I replied, "Because your mother's injury wasn't an accident. Elena set her up to go to the construction site, and Silas cut the brakes on the truck. I've waited 25 years to see them destroy each other." Trying to remain calm, but my voice still laced with hatred, I added, "I had the job arranged for Elena so she could easily get a weapon. I lured Silas here by having the manager give his girlfriend 2 dining vouchers. The table was right in Elena's line of sight. Silas was taken to the hospital but didn't survive the surgery. Later, Julian told me that Caleb, unable to sustain himself without Silas's money, ended up working as a male escort. Ironically, one of Julian's classmates even hired him. Days passed, and life seemed to return to normal, but a call from the hospital disrupted the calm. The doctor said Beatrice has woken up. I could hardly believe my ears. After 25 years, she was finally awake. I rushed to the hospital with Julian and my mother-in-law. In the hospital room, Beatrice lay on the bed, pale but clear-eyed. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "Arthur, you look older." Tears welled up in my eyes. "You've been asleep for so long. We've waited for you." I gestured to Julian and my mother-in-law waiting outside. Beatrice looked at Julian. "Who is this?" I explained that he was our test tube baby. She accepted it well, looking at Julian with motherly affection. "What's his name?" I answered, "His name is Julian." Beatrice smiled softly. "Julian, what a nice name.